The following is a fourth-hand production.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Sad Times. My name is Kevin. Welcome again, and thanks for listening as always. For those of you who don't know what the show is all about or listening for the first time, basically it's a show where I have a guest on every week, and that guest and I talk about some times where he or she has had some really sad times in their life, how they reacted, what they were feeling, what sort of physical, emotional stuff happened, what they were able to show to the world, maybe what they weren't, and then how maybe people around them reacted, and you know, just kind of talk about the stuff that we all, in one way or another, go through, and we don't spend a lot of time, at least in everyday life, talking about, man, I was really sad yesterday, and here's what I did, and here's how I acted, and this is why I acted that way, etc. So we try to shed a little light on something that we all deal with. I myself have been pretty down lately, so this will be a nice little therapeutic talk for me. As always, we do ask you, if you do listen, you know, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, mash it, I think some people say, and then also support our sponsors, and our main sponsor is Fuck Cigarettes. Fuck brand cigarettes, right? Not fuck cigarettes. No, they're Fuck cigarettes. So go ahead and light up a fuck after you listen to this, because Fuck cigarettes have been good to us, and we want them to be good to you as well. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my guest, who I really don't know, which I'm pretty excited about. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Hey, Tach, how are you, man?
Hey, what's going on?
Well, Tach, so I know you kind of from the Fourth Hand Network and the underworld of podcasting.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do, what's your podcast, and just a little bit of your background real fast.
Okay, let's see. Well, my name is Tach. I host a podcast called A Very Brady Podcast. It is a Brady Bunch rewatch podcast. And every week I have a different guest, and we go in and we watch an episode of the show, and then we break it down on the podcast and tear it apart or have fun with it. I do enjoy the Brady Bunch, but sometimes my guests don't. So
yeah. Do you watch it now when you're with your guest? Do you watch it live?
No. We watch it beforehand.
Okay. I would definitely. I will say, as far as the Brady Bunch goes, an anecdote I like to tell is I was at the gym one day, and it had like Me TV on the TV in front of like the elliptical I was on, and I was listening to the Beastie Boys. And the actual lyric, I'm like Sam the Butcher bringing Alice the meat, was on when Sam the Butcher walked in to talk to Alice. And I was like, wow, that's pretty fucking crazy.
That is crazy.
So was that just a show that you've always loved?
I have a history with it. I mean, I watched it a lot growing up as a kid, and I definitely wanted to do like a rewatch podcast because I haven't done one yet. And I was trying to come up with a show that people can relate to. Now, originally, I was going to be doing the Andy Griffith Show because I just like that show a lot too. But then, exactly. But then I started like looking into it. I found another Andy Griffith podcast, started listening to it, and turns out it was really boring.
Yeah, not a lot going on, right?
Right. And everybody on the podcast was like 80 years old, you know. And then I was thinking, my thought was like, hey, if the show gets big enough, I can have people that were actually on the Andy Griffith Show. But turns out like 98% of them are dead.
Yeah.
So you'd have to be a child on the show, and it's Ron Howard was the big one, and he's kind of busy now, so I don't think he's going to. Yeah.
Just imagine though.
Yeah. So it was literally like the night before I was going to record my first episode. I had a buddy of mine was going to be my first guest. And I just started thinking, and I was like, I don't know if the Andy Griffith Show is the way to go. And then I just thought of the Brady Bunch. I was like, holy shit, it's got a cult following. Everybody knows the Brady Bunch. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people love it. I was like, it's perfect. And so I texted my buddy. I was like, hey, I know we're recording tomorrow, but change up on the show. We're going to do the Brady Bunch instead. And he was like, are you fucking kidding me? I fucking hate the Brady Bunch. And I was like, too bad. And so we did it, and it's been going good. I'm having a blast.
That's awesome, man. And just to say the name of it again, just so people can go check it out.
It's called A Very Brady Podcast.
Right on. And I know that I plan to hopefully be on that one day.
Yes, we need to get you on there.
And it is part of the Fourth Hand Network, which
Indeed.
my lawyer tells me I'm a part of. So, all right. So, Tach, again, we don't know each other very well. We've talked a little bit online. I'm in Chicago here. You're in Virginia. But let's get into it, man. We've had a couple online conversations about it, and you had expressed interest in being on the show. And first and foremost, thank you again for even considering coming on. This is not an easy show to do, so thank you for that. And something that you told me about was, and it always kind of starts here, right? It starts with family. It starts with growing up and how we form into ourselves. So growing up, tell us about your family. Did you have siblings? Where'd you grow up? Relationship with your parents? Let's start there.
Okay. Well, I was born a military brat. So both of my parents, when I was first born, were in the Air Force.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up living like all over the world. So when I was a few months old, both my parents got stationed out to Greece. And a little fun fact about it, my actual first language was Greek. I can't speak it now, but
well, that's all Greek to me.
Yeah. So by the time I was 4 years old, we had moved back to the States, and then from there on, I learned English and just started speaking English. But my parents got divorced when I was 4. So
do you remember that very well at all?
I do a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I do remember a time when they were actually worked together. And I actually remember the last day when we left and my dad stayed behind. I remember that day. And so it was...
You got in the car with your mom and you...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he stayed at the house and you were going to a new place to live.
Yeah, I think it was... I can't remember where we moved to. It might have been California, maybe. So back then it was my mom and me and my sister. I have an older sister. Well... I have 4 total sisters, but growing up with, she's a half sister. So we shared a mother, but she had a different father, which she had never met. So as my mom, my sister, and me had moved out and left to wherever her next duty station was, which I think it was California next. So ever since then, I started spending the summers at my dad's, which he moved to Illinois, and he eventually got remarried around when I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Where in Illinois did he move?
Jacksonville.
Oh, no shit. Just near our beautiful capital of Springfield. It's about 30 miles. Yeah. And Brent Hand grew up near Jacksonville, and our good friend Nick lives near there now. I'm
very familiar with Jacksonville, Illinois. I spent my summers.
That's what you would do that's your summer vacation. You got to go to Jacksonville, Illinois.
Yeah, but I actually had a blast. A lot of my favorite memories from as a kid growing up were in Jacksonville, Illinois.
And why? Tell us about that.
Well, because like when I was with my mother during the school year, of course, I had school I had to go to, plus my mom was working all the time, single mom, and it was just me. I was a latchkey kid growing up. And then once I went to my dad's for the summer with his new wife, my stepmom, she's an amazing woman. And she also had 3 daughters as well, who their father was not around. So my dad actually had legally adopted them as his own daughters. And so I grew up with them, and it was kind of like living at the Brady Bunch house over there,
Here's the story.
Yeah. So over there was a lot of family stuff. There was a lot of big family events. There was a lot of because my dad and my stepmother both grew up in Jacksonville, Illinois. They spent their whole lives there because my dad had gotten out of the Air Force and then moved back to Jacksonville, his hometown. And so family everywhere, all over in that area. So there was always big family events. There was always just events going on throughout the summer. Just always something. And so I just always had a blast when I would be at my mom's. It was just a lot of going to school and coming home doing chores, stuff like that. And my mom was absent a lot just because she was working all the time. I don't fault her in any way. She was a hardworking woman. So
was she still in the Air Force and then had she gotten out as well?
Yeah, she retired when I was about 12. She did 22 years in the Air Force. So.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What years are we talking about here? 80s, 70s?
So I'm 44.
Okay.
So this was like in the 80s, throughout the 80s growing up, which is the best decade to grow up. So
is that right? Well, I thought the Brady Bunch was on in the 70s.
Well, it was, but
yeah, I'm just kidding you. When it was a school year, did you talk? I mean, how did you keep in contact with your dad, if at all?
Not really much. Like, he's not a very big communicator, so I may have gotten like a card or something like that from him, or a letter back then. Back in the 80s, see, we had these things called letters that you would write. It's kind of like an email, but it's more like something you can touch.
Really?
You're with that, right?
No,
Yeah.
I touch my email screen all the time. Just a lot of fingerprints on my computer.
Yeah. So he would send like little cards, very rarely, and they're always like very short, like, "Hey, this, and this. Here's some news here. Okay, bye." Kind of a thing, and that would be about it.
Did you miss him?
I think so. I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, first of all, like, my dad, like, he's a great guy, no problems. Like, me and him are actually exactly alike. So,
well, how do you mean? Like, because I always say I'm turning into my dad.
I've always been my dad.
You've always been. So, give us an example of what is really similar between the two of you.
Okay, so my dad, first of all, we look exactly alike, and then his personality is exactly like me, very passive, very chill, laid back. I don't think I've hardly ever seen my dad get mad, like, ever. And he actually started podcasting before podcasting was a thing. So he used to, like, go down in his basement, and he'd have all this audio gear set up, and he would just start recording stuff like it was a radio station. He was a DJ. He would talk about family stuff that's going on, and then put music on there and play stupid games and make little sketches with himself, and do voices and stuff like that. He used to do college radio and DJ stuff when he was in college. And then he would put that all into a disc on a CD and burn it, and he would, like, send it out to all the whole family and stuff like that. And then he's just into music and stuff too, like I am. I'm a lot more into it than he is. I became like a musician and a singer and audio engineer and stuff like that, which he knows a little bit about audio engineering, and it's just a lot of that kind of, a lot of similarities. Everything, really small little things. Every time I see, like, my stepsisters or my stepmom, they're always like, "God, you're just like Dad." Like, it's exactly what he does. Just little things, and they know better than I do nowadays. So
wow, yeah. And so the stepsisters are your three older sisters from your stepmom. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's 2 older and 1 younger.
Oh, 1 younger. Okay. And did they live year round with your dad?
Yes. Yeah, they grew up with him. They knew him. They called him Dad since the day they got married, because they didn't have a dad. So
yeah,
it's very similar too. Because when I was in my last marriage, and I know we'll get to that later, but my wife at the time had twin girls that had never met their father either. And so once I married her, they started calling me Dad, and me and her didn't work out, but yet I still treat them like my own. They still call me Dad to this day, even though me and their mother haven't been together for over 10 years. So.
Wow. How old were they when you got married?
They were just got out of first grade.
Okay.
And now they're 21.
Wow. Okay. And so you guys keep in touch?
Oh, definitely, like several times a week.
That's great. So then did you feel like, with you being out in California or wherever you were with your mom, and your stepsisters grew up with your dad, did you feel that there was a disparity in kind of your relationship with him and their relationship with him?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely got more of him than I did, obviously. Sometimes I would felt like he almost, like, favored them more sometimes, because I was his only biological child.
Oh, right.
But yet,
because your older sister was from another relationship your mom had.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it just seemed like they got the better half of him than I did. When I was there in the summers, I spent more time with my stepmom and stepsisters than I did with him, because he worked a lot. He owned his own business and was always working.
Yeah. So you didn't have really a lot of bonding time with him?
Not really. If I did, it wasn't like any, like, alone father-son time. It was like whole family stuff,
Yeah. Did you ever come to a point where you guys had that bonding point time? Excuse me.
No. I mean, what does that look like? I don't even know.
Yeah. So after let's say you went to high school, graduated high school,
Yeah.
what type of visiting did you do after that when you don't have so much of the structure of your summers and maybe you went off to college or wherever it is you went? Did you just kind of drop off with communicating with your dad or seeing your dad?
I joined the military right after high school, so I went in the Navy. I still communicated as far as like when I first went in, texting wasn't a thing yet, but there was email every once in a while. Pretty rare. I have been up there to visit since then a couple of times. Because one time my dad was in the hospital, like we thought we were going to lose him, but he ended up pulling through, which is good. Went up there. That was probably I don't even 12 years ago, and then I went up there again probably about 5-6 years ago for Christmas. But that's really about it since being an adult.
Wow. And now that texting quote is a thing, do you guys text or is it just the random email?
He'll shoot me a message on Facebook every once in a while. It's pretty rare, but I got one from him the other day, but it was just like, hey, talking about his brother. Hey, your Uncle Mike is interested in podcasting and doing YouTube videos. Can you get a hold of him and let him know what's going on with that? I'm like, sure. So, and it was just a couple other messages back and forth. But other than that, that'll happen like maybe once every several months.
Wow. Have you ever told him that you'd like to talk to him more?
No, but I have talked to like my stepmother about it or stepsisters about it. And my stepmother always says, he's just not a very good communicator, but just so you know, he does love you. He does want to spend more time. He's just not very good at that kind of thing, so I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I'm not either, apparently. I mean, I have no excuse. I can't say, well, he's the parent and I'm the child. I'm not a child. I'm 44 years old. Yeah. I can't make excuses for myself.
Okay. But is he close now? Do your stepsisters live near him? Is he still in Jacksonville?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all pretty much live in Jacksonville, except for one of my sisters. I think she lives in Champaign, I think.
Oh, sure. I'm pretty sure that's where I was conceived.
Oh, well, that's a weird info that you have about yourself.
Thank you very much. I just did some backdating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was it the time of some big concert or something that your parents went to? And
no. So my dad, they liked oldies and stuff, but my dad's never been drunk, so none of that. Just
my dad doesn't really drink either, and I don't either. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did in my 20s, but not anymore. I just don't drink anymore.
Okay, that's fair. A lot cheaper that way.
Yeah.
So you went into the Navy. How long were you in the Navy?
I did 4 years. I got out for almost 2, and then went back in and did another 4. So
wow. Okay.
Total, yeah.
And you had mentioned earlier that you've been married more than once. So when was your first marriage?
First marriage was in 2000. I married my first wife. I can't remember the exact date, but it was in 2000.
Okay. And how'd you guys meet?
We used to work at this retail place together, and she was a new hire, and I just kind of love at first sight kind of a thing, and just started talking to her.
All right. How long after you met did you get married?
Probably. Actually, I think we met probably in around 99, sometime in 99, and we got married in 2000. So probably about a little over a year, maybe.
Okay. What was your relationship like?
With her, it was good. She ended up having a bit of a substance abuse problem, an alcohol problem. Okay. That was kind of towards later in the marriage that really came out and became very prominent. More so alcohol than anything else.
She just drank all the time, or just when she drank, it just became an issue, or she relied on it?
She would be, how you get like completely hammered drunk where you can barely stand up, Yeah. She would be like that probably 3 or 4 times a week. And it just got too much for me. I was in the Navy at the time. I was working a lot of hours. And I just didn't have time for that kind of behavior. And it got frustrating. And
did she seek help?
It was, I don't want to give any spoilers away on what's coming up in the story, but it was towards the end of our relationship that there was an incident that happened. So we'd gone out separately. So I went out with a buddy of mine, and she went out with some friend of hers, and then we all kind of went out drinking separate ways. And I'd come home with my buddy, who's our roommate too, just before she did, or no, just after she did. She had already gotten home, been home for probably about a half hour, and then she was already asleep or passed out in the bed already. And then we had looked in the laundry room. The washer was completely dumped over on its side. And we're like, what the hell? And so the next morning I asked her, I was like, what'd you do to the washer? And she had like no memory of it, which is pretty common for her to do something and not have any recollection of it the next morning, including like huge fights she would start with me that didn't make any sense, and to where she would throw shit, break shit, and then the next morning not remember anything. And after that incident, she kind of realized, she started crying. She goes, I think I have a drinking problem. I'm like, thank you. Like, yes, you do. And so she started looking in to get help. And then a couple weeks later, we were in a really bad car accident, and she was killed instantly in the accident.
Jesus. Where did you live at the time?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, okay. And what was it? Just to run a red light, or?
We were on a major highway and heading, I don't remember where we were heading to, but we were just driving on the highway. And you ever see like those tire treads from semis, like on the highway?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. She was driving. We actually had just bought a brand new vehicle. That's what we were doing. We just bought it, like left the dealership, and was driving home. That's where we were going. And she was driving. I was in the passenger, and she had seen it. It looked like a whole tire in the middle of the highway. And then, so she swerved, and then we just fishtailed on the highway and ended up crossing the median and got slammed by another semi.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was around 25, I think.
How old was she?
She was like 21.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you seriously hurt?
Not really. I broke a rib, and I had some damage on the top of my head to where you can see my skull, and I had to get like 24 staples and just banged up scratches everywhere. But other than that, not really. I mean, within a week I was back to normal. So
did you know right away that something was very wrong? When you, I guess the word would be, came to?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't remember the accident at all. I remember it's about as close as a semi could get just before it hits is the last thing I remember. And next thing I remember being woken up like in the vehicle with paramedics and everything. They had to take the roof off the car because it had like smashed in. And so I looked over at her, and it looked like she was just like passed out. And then so I tried to wake her up, and they're like, stop. I'm like, what? And then I noticed that there's like blood like pouring down my face, and they're like, put a towel. They're like, here, hold this towel up here, which was basically blocking my view from her. And I was kind of curious as to why they were blocking my view from her. And then I could hear them doing stuff with her. And I don't know if you've ever witnessed someone dying or anything like that, but there's this like gurgling noise that happens that's very disturbing to hear. And I've heard it twice now in my life, and I heard that and I was like, holy shit, like I think something just happened. I think my life just changed. And I didn't find out 100% until I got into the hospital. I got air vac'd on a helicopter to the nearest hospital, and then the investigative officer came over and told me that she didn't make it.
What was your first reaction?
Well, first reaction was I knew it because I could already feel it. Even when I got lifted to the hospital and I was at the hospital, I not once ever wondered where she was. I just kind of knew that she didn't make it. So, I mean, obviously it was alarming for sure, but I was still trying to deal with all my injuries as well at the same time. So it really didn't hit me for a while. I mean, for sure I cried for a few days, but like the feeling of her actually being gone forever didn't hit probably for another couple of weeks, which was really weird. how that
do you think it's
happens.
like a prolonged type of shock almost?
I don't know. It's just like, I remember I was at home alone in our apartment. I couldn't even sleep in our bed. I slept out on the couch for months. And then I went to the kitchen to get something to eat, and I looked into the freezer and I saw something I was going to eat. And I remember thinking, oh, wait, I can't eat that because that's what she's going to want. And then I was like, what the hell am I doing? And then that's when it hit me. And I literally said out loud, home alone, she's never coming back. And it was shocking to actually say it out loud and to hear it.
That's just got to be the most horrible feeling in the world.
Yeah.
And the finality.
Lonely.
I can't.
Yeah.
Lonely. That's, yeah. So, geez. Okay. So how, once that happens, Tach, and how did you cope with that?
It wasn't easy. Like, well, first of all, I was in the Navy at the time. And I was just getting ready to go out to sea on deployment, but the Navy decided to leave me behind so I can kind of deal with my issues. So when we go out to sea, I was in submarines. So the way I was on Trident submarines.
Sorry, that's just really neat. Okay.
Yeah. We'd go out for about 3 or 4 months at a time, and then we'd be in for about 3 or 4 months at a time. So we're just getting ready to go out on deployment. But my captain told me, he's like, hey, we're going to leave you behind for about a little over a month, and then you'll come join us out on patrol. And I was like, all right, I appreciate that. And so during that time, I still had to be held accountable by the Navy. So he just had me check in at this one office building like Monday through Thursday, just kind of a morning check-in. And that was really about it. And I was usually home by like 10 a.m. every single day. So I spent all that time like alone, like at home with my dog, and so that was kind of difficult, sitting home alone, still dealing with it.
Right. Nothing to take your mind off it.
Right. Except this was just before 9/11 happened, and 9/11 hit. And so that was a big distraction.
Yeah. Especially being in the military. Did that change your deployment or?
No, it didn't change I still met the boat out at sea, but it did change a lot of things as far as I couldn't go onto the base for like several days after that because just of everything on lockdown. And so it just meant more time I was home alone. So
Jesus. Did you talk with your family during this time? Did you have friends who came over? Like,
for sure. Actually, my stepmom and stepsisters all came down from Illinois. I can't remember. Yeah, my dad did too. That's right. Sorry. My dad, stepmom, they all came down to spent like a day or so there. And then my youngest stepsister actually stayed behind for a few more days just to make sure I was good and all that before she went back to Illinois. And of course, my mom and sister came to visit too at the time. Where were they? I can't remember where they were. I think they weren't too far away, probably a couple hours away. Yeah, they were about 3 or 4 hours away. So they'd come up to Jacksonville and spent a couple days there too.
Okay.
But eventually everybody had to go back home. So
did you do any sort of like grief therapy or anything like that? Yeah,
the Navy required me to go to see, I don't know if he was a psychiatrist or what, but I had to go talk to somebody for probably, I think I had to do probably like 5-6 sessions.
Did you find that helpful at all?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe a little bit. He was a nice guy.
It just, I keep going back to what you said a minute ago about how lonely this would feel. And it does sound like that's wonderful that your family was there, but it seems like so brief. And then there was just a lot of time with you and your thoughts.
For sure.
How do you think that affected you?
I don't know. This is not the only time in my life where I deal with loneliness and just being alone in my thoughts a lot.
Obsessive thoughts or depression or anxiety in general?
I definitely deal with anxiety. Like, it's not diagnosed, but like I'm guessing some sort of general anxiety issues. And like I had a panic attack probably about 2 years ago, maybe, but I didn't know what it was. And I was basically laying in bed alone.
Uh-huh.
And I just felt like, because I'd spent a lot of time alone, and it kind of worried me because, like, I would think, because where I was working at the time, I would do like what's called a pitman schedule. So I'd work like 4 days on, 3 days off, and then work 3 days on and 4 days off. So I had a lot of time off. I would spend those 3 or 4 days off like completely alone. And I would think to myself, like, I could die tonight and nobody would know, for days. And so that kind of made me like, I started to think like, oh, I can't breathe now. And what's going on? And should I be calling 911? Like, and then I realized it's like all in my mind and I'm just like panicking for no reason. It's just.
How did you come out of that?
At the moment, how did I come out of it?
Correct.
Just basically telling myself like, calm down. Like this, it's all in your head. Just chill out. You take a deep breath. And so I would take a deep breath. I'm like, see, you can breathe. You're good. And as long as I knew I could do that, that kind of helped me through that moment.
As somebody who's had numerous panic attacks, it should be, for anybody who hasn't had one, to be able to talk oneself out of a panic attack is quite a feat.
Really?
Oh, yes. At least from my perspective.
I've done it a couple times. A couple times I'll start to feel one coming, and I always have to say to myself, like, calm down, like almost to where like, stop being like a pussy. Stop, chill out, take a deep breath. You're good, And then I would take a couple deep breaths and I'm like, I am good. I'm good. I'm okay. And then a lot of times I would subside it pretty good as long as I catch it early.
I think there's a lot of strength in that. And I think you shouldn't, there's a lot of strength in that. So that's awesome. I'm glad that you have that.
It's good to hear.
Yeah. So you lost your first wife tragically.
Yes.
But you obviously, from what you talked about earlier, you were at least married. How many were you? You were married one more time, 2 more times?
I was actually married 3 times total, so 2 more times after that one. So I had met a girl way too soon after my first wife had passed. So I had met her. I think she passed away. My first wife passed away in August 2001. And then I can't remember the exact date I started dating the next girl, which I married. It was probably maybe 6-7 months later.
Okay.
It was way too soon. I was not ready. But I felt lonely. I felt,
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And so I met this girl and I was trying to fill a void. And I eventually married her probably about 2.5 years later, kind of because I felt pressured to because of her and her family.
Meaning, like, this is not a legitimate relationship. If we've been together this long, we should be married or nothing. Is that
pretty
that
much
kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Was she religious? Was it a religious thing with her family?
No. It was just like, are you wasting my time kind of a thing, which it wasn't put that way, but you know what I mean? Like you feel the pressure of it. And I even remember the night before I was getting married to her, I told my best friend, my best man, I was like, I don't want to get married. I don't want to marry her. And then he thought it was just nerves. And I was like, maybe so. I don't know. But I can't back out now kind of a thing. But that marriage ended up ending before the first anniversary. So that didn't last very long.
And so you would have been about 28-ish?
About 29, I think, 29. Yeah.
So you said that to your best man. How lonely did that feel?
Well, for me?
Yeah, for you. I just can't imagine saying that to somebody the night before I'm supposed to marry somebody. That's got to be a very isolated and lonely feeling.
I never thought about it that way, but I guess so.
Did you feel any shame when you thought that, or were you just like, no, I shouldn't be doing this?
I was just more concerned. Like, am I making the right decision here? Like, I figured, well, it'll work itself out, I guess. Marriages have problems. Like, I had problems in my first marriage with the whole substance abuse, and figured if we weren't, because my second wife was very controlling, and that was very uncomfortable.
Like, she if you wanted to do something, you had to run it by her type of thing, or
not so much like that, but it was more of like she was very good with money. Let's put it that way, very good with money. So I remember one time it was just things like, hey, your cell phone bill is like $10 more this month than it was last month. What the fuck are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? And like she would scream at me like I'm a child, first of all, and as if like we were about to go broke, which we weren't. We were both very comfortable, had a very comfortable living. Both of us made great incomes. And she would like scream at me and belittle me like I'm a child, and like almost to the point of like, I'm going to take your toys away if this happens again. And then we had gone to visit her family that same day, and her whole family, even like her little nieces, were coming up to me going, "I heard you got in trouble today," just stuff like that. And I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Were they all wearing the same dress, and were they scary like the Shining girls? I mean, that's so creepy.
I know. And it's just like shit like that, or it's like, or if I had a few missed calls from her one time, her voicemails from her literally were, "When I call, you fucking answer," those kind of things. And I was like, holy shit, like this chick.
Now, had you seen any of that before the marriage?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I knew it was there going into it, and she was aware of it too, and she would try to, a lot of times it was a joke about how controlling she was, but then she was aware that I wasn't always happy about that, and so she did try to work on it towards the end, but it just wasn't enough.
Did you end that relationship?
I did, yeah.
And were you in Florida at this time too?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel after that? Did you feel a relief?
Well, it's very stressful going through a divorce, and so I mean, she was not happy, obviously, and very hurt. And so it went through it wasn't like a nightmare divorce. It wasn't, but it wasn't fun. It was very stressful because I still had guilt from ending that, and I felt bad, but I knew it was the right decision for both of us, really, not just me, but her too. I don't know.
Yeah. I myself have never been married or never been divorced. But I've seen people very close to me go through divorce, and it just seems just unbelievably challenging.
Yeah.
That relationship ended, but then you met somebody who had twin girls.
Right. So it was actually as a friend of mine that I'd known since like the 90s. We never dated or anything like that. She was actually dating a friend of mine when I was in the Navy. That's how I met her. And we just kind of kept in contact off and on. And so I'd gotten back in contact with her and just started talking. And then she started telling me, "Oh, I used to have a thing for you." Like, no shit. Like I used to have a thing, and then we just started dating. And then, one thing led to another. And she had twin girls. At the time, they were in first grade, and when I had first met her, she was just gotten pregnant with the twins. So, I mean, now here they are in first grade when we started seeing each other, and eventually I married her.
So, how long into the relationship did you guys get married?
Probably about, let's see, what was it? Probably a little over a year.
And did you have that same wariness going into this marriage, or were you
No, not at all. Yeah, I was much more confident with her.
Okay. And how long were you guys married?
Probably around probably about 2.5 years or so. Total time was about 3 years together, and then she ended up cheating on me, and so that's how that ended.
Jesus. How did you find out about that?
She was working and I was working, and there was a guy that she worked with that she had been friends with and would come over to the house sometimes and hang out. And every once in a while, like some red flags would fly up, and I would kind of question, like, is there something going on between you two? And she would always hit me with like, "How dare you suggest such a thing?" And next thing you know, I'm like apologizing to her, when it turns out that this guy was, and he's like faking a friendship with me this whole time. Meanwhile, he's like fucking my wife, and they weren't just fucking. I mean, they eventually became in love and wanted to be together. And she was trying to get out of the marriage with me so she could be with him and all this shit. And I ended up finding out through her sister. Finally, couldn't take it anymore. And finally, she like emailed me or something. It's like, "Hey, I need to talk to you. Can you call me?" So I called her, and she's like, "I can't take this anymore. I have to tell you." And she told me like everything and how long they had been together and all this and that.
What was your reaction?
Completely blown away, and like so much stress and anxiety, and very, very hurt and like betrayed.
How did you confront her about it?
This was late at night, so it was the next morning. I had can't remember if I called her or texted her or whatever, but I eventually ended up seeing her face to face, and I was like, "So I know about you and this other guy," and she's like, "Well, who the hell told you that? Because that's not true." And I was just finally like, "You need to stop with the lies. Just be honest," Because at the time we were physically separated because she was saying that there was all these problems in the marriage and she needed some time to think about things. And she made me feel like all the problems in the marriage were my fault. And so she had like moved out, just another part of town. And so I had the kids. I was taking the kids back to her, and I confronted her about it. And then she finally like admitted it that yes, they were together. And she's like, I was trying to find the right time to tell you. And I was like, there's no right time to tell someone that. And just like, I just kind of like yelled at her a little bit, and then I went back home and just like was hurt and cried, basically.
So then you guys obviously got divorced.
Well, if you really want to go into technicalities, technically, we're still legally married to this day.
Wait a minute. How long was this? Like 12 years ago?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, we've been married this whole still legally married. It's kind of an inside joke. And now me and her get along very well. We're like really good friends, and sometimes she'll even like call me up just to bitch about her boyfriend to me or whatever, which is funny too, because sometimes he'll call me just to bitch about her to me. And it's hilarious because neither one of them know the other one does it. But, this is a different boyfriend than the guy she cheated on me with.
So they didn't end up together, obviously.
No.
Or wait, hold on. Is your wife a bigamist? It's the hard-hitting questions here on Sad Times. Geez. So how do you feel about that arrangement?
Which one?
Sorry, still being married.
Oh, it's gotten to be a joke for this long, but we're actually talking about, she's actually working on getting paperwork now, drawn up to finally get this. It's going to be uncontested divorce. We're trying to do it as easily and cheaply as possible. And we're just going to do it together. We're not going to go to court or any kind of bullshit like that. There's no point. We agree. So
it's a really happy thing to hear that you guys are so friendly and get along so well.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously, you're still in the girls' lives.
Yeah.
Did you keep up any sort of relationship with your second wife?
No, definitely not. I did, however. What was it? I think I sent her an email like a few years later. I can't remember why, but it was for something, and it was something important I had to tell her. And she emailed me back, and the first sentence in there was, first of all, don't ever contact me again. And then it was like, thank you for the information. And that was pretty much it. I haven't talked to her since.
So you haven't contacted her again?
No. I think it's better that way for her too, because I really kind of like hurt her, and there's no point in me stabbing at old wounds.
Yeah. Geez. Okay. So have you been in a relationship since?
Just a couple here and there. I can't seem to make relationships last very long. So like my longest relationship ever, they all seem to die. If they go past a year, they will never get past a 3-year mark. For some reason, 3 years is when my relationships just seem to end. And I don't know why. I mean, I've had a couple of really good relationships. I've had one probably like 5-6 years ago that was very good, and I had like no complaints about her. She's the one that got away, basically.
Do you still think about her a lot?
For sure. And that was several years ago. But I was just in a bad time in my life because I was dealing with my mother, who had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
How old was your mother, and how old were you?
This was just 5 or 6 years ago, so I was in my like late 30s, mid-late 30s, and my mom was in her 60s, I think. Yeah, early 60s. And so I was having to take care of her like every single day. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with somebody who has cancer, but they have to go to appointments like every single day, 5 days a week. So she had to go to radiation every day, Monday through Friday. And not to mention that we lived in the same apartment complex, but so I had to go to her apartment like probably about every 3 or 4 hours, like 24/7 around the clock. So just to check on her, make sure everything's good to go, if she's taking her meds, do her dishes, make her a meal, clean up, do her laundry, stuff like that. So basically I wasn't working for about 15 months, just having to take care of her like every single day and take her to appointments, take her to get chemo done, to just things like that. And it was very stressful. And this is when I was with this one girl, and I just kind of fell into this depression, started putting on weight, and just like dealing with like fuck it mode, so to speak.
Well, expand on that just a little bit.
Okay, so like I had other issues going on as well. So like I had this IRS issues I'm not going to go into, but I had IRS issues. I had some other kind of just other little things like that going on all at the same time. And I just got to the point where it's just like, this is too much. I'm way overwhelmed with all this shit. I can't even have a life because I can't go anywhere because I have to be at my mom's in a few hours all the time, So I could never, I felt bad for my girlfriend at the time because she's having to deal with this, and, we can't go out and do anything. And plus I wasn't even working. Because my mom had her retirement pension and stuff like that, so she could afford to pay her bills and my bills and, stuff like that. So, and it just does something to you when you can't work. It's not healthy for, the brain. You can't contribute to society,
Oh man. Yeah, I would go crazy. Everybody's like, "Oh, I'd love to not work." I think I'd love it for about 2 days, and then I'd go nuts. So,
they're like a piece of shit.
You took care of your mom, you said, for 15 months?
Yeah, it's about 15 months, yeah.
And then she passed away?
Yeah, she passed away in like July 2014.
Did your depression extend after that?
Not so much depression, no, because now when she passed away, it was almost like, this is like a whole nother hour if you wanted to just talking about this issue. I mean, I know you don't have that kind of time, but so while she was sick, I had like this, like I was in denial that she was even sick,
Even when you were out of a job and checking on her every 3 or 4 hours?
Yeah. Like it would just like I didn't think she was lying or anything like that, but I thought it was because nobody ever said, no doctor ever told me like, yes, she is dying. Like no doctor ever told me that. Not that I thought that it was made up, but like we never heard that. She never heard it. I never heard it. So I didn't know how much time she had. I was like, for all I knew, she had another 20 years, Mm-hmm. And so every time she would be like, oh, I'm having trouble breathing, I'd have this attitude like, walk it off, stop being dramatic, kind of. I never said that to her, but that's how it would feel inside. And then like, like, oh my God, you need me to do this now. And I feel bad now to this day because I felt like so much guilt. Like, when she did pass away, it's like, holy shit, she really wasn't. Maybe she wasn't being dramatic. Maybe, was I being a dick to her this whole time? But I never was a dick to her face. Like she never saw that. And she always thanked me and always said, you don't realize how much, I appreciate you doing this, stuff like that. So she was always very thankful. But
was your sister around?
No, she was, well, my sister that we share the same mother. No, she was living somewhere else in the country.
Okay.
She did come back for about a year. It was actually the last year of my mom's life, but she was so busy. My sister's like a career woman and very busy all the time, which I wasn't. I wasn't even working. So I dealt with my mom a lot more than she did.
Did you try to talk to her to bring her into the fold more, or did you just feel like, well, I don't think that's the right approach?
Well, yeah, I talked to her all the time about what was going on with our mom and just like having to do this, having to do that. It's so stressful. And, and my sister definitely like empathized, was like, I wish I could do more. I feel bad you're having to take on all this. Because it wasn't just like her not feeling well and stuff like that. It was also, there was times where my mom was completely dealing with psychosis and dealing with craziness. Like she would have like auditory hallucinations and think that somebody was, or just, I don't know what, she never saw anything, but she'd always hear things or think she did, or she would be paranoid and think that she would tell me how the neighbor guy upstairs is watching her through a, infrared scope and and some other neighbor kicked in her door and tried to shoot at her. And I'm like, nothing like that happened. What are you talking about? And there was another time when my sister was still living up north. I would get phone calls from the police 2:00 in the morning going, what's going on? Like, well, your mom had a life alert button. She would push it and say that her daughter is kidnapped and being held hostage. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I have to come over there and have to deal with the cops and be like, look, she's dealing with psychosis. I don't know what's going on with her.
Always deal with mental health issues, or did this just come near the end of her life?
Yeah, this was just towards the end. Sometimes UTIs can cause this kind of a thing. And so, like, I had to try to convince her that my sister was not being held captive somewhere, or another time she thought I was hiding my sister somewhere and blaming me for it. I'm like, why would I do that? And then she's like, I don't know. And then it was just dealing with stuff like that. And then she would be missing, but turns out she was hiding in a utility closet outside her apartment. Just stuff like that, like all the time. And I'm just like, oh my God. So when she did finally pass, I almost had this sense of relief, like not just for me, but for her too. It's like, at least I don't have to deal with this anymore, but also more importantly, she doesn't have to deal with this anymore. So my depression didn't really continue after that, because now I was free to start working, start getting my life in order again, which I eventually did. Took a long time, but I eventually did. But I still deal with, like, I don't know if you want to call it PTSD from that, because I have such a fear of death now, such a fear of cancer. And I always think every little feeling I have is like, well, the shit, that's cancer. I have it. Like, I'm scared to even go to a doctor just to get a checkup because I'm afraid they'll find something, So
have you been to the doctor since?
No. Well, that's not true. I went one time for something else, but I did tell the doctor I'm aware that I need to get like a full physical blood work. I know I need, especially at my age now, I need to. I don't feel sick in any way. I feel just like I did when I was 19, but that doesn't mean anything. And I'm just scared to do it. And I know I need to do it, and I keep putting it off. And I don't know.
Does that make you more anxious? I've dealt with the same thing.
Do you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's certain things I'd rather just, it's almost like, you know what? It's better not knowing, because if I don't know, there's still a possibility that it's fine. Even though 99% of the time you're going to be fine. But it's that there's just that little moment of uncertainty that is just, it's unbearable.
Yeah, it causes anxiety. This is where I get these panic attacks from. Like, my anxiety level is through the roof. I'm sure if I went to the doctor and finally got that physical, finally get that blood work done, and he said everything's good, my anxiety level would probably drop down significantly.
But the anxiety that you would feel when making the appointment, going to the appointment, waiting to hear the all clear, it's just, it seems like it's too much to take, right?
Yeah, it's like scary, but I know I need to do it. And plus, if there is something, it could be early enough to catch it and then get rid of it, Right. But if I put it off, it's, how it is.
I sure do. And Tach, so you had said a few minutes ago, you said, we could do a whole another hour, and I would happily have you back on again. I can't tell you how impressed I am by your recall of these details, the very straightforward way that you've told your story and shared with us. None of that is easy at all, and you have obviously gone through a lot. But I can guarantee you that somebody out there will listen to this and feel less alone, and that's really the goal of the show. And so I just appreciate you so much coming on and sharing your story.
I appreciate you having me, dude. I mean, this is like therapy, and that's another thing. I need to get therapy. I know I need to have therapy, and I need to do that too. It's just, I don't know. I make excuses.
I think we all do, right? We all make excuses, and we're all just trying to get through each day, one day at a time. And the shit that gets thrown at us, whether it be super duper heavy and hard, like a lot of the stuff that you've dealt with, or small things, we'll call them, life's paper cuts that just kind of are annoying. We have to deal with them, and sometimes it's it's the only way we know how to deal with them is to push them down or push them away. So for you to be able to come on here and share your story like this, I think a lot of people will find a lot of empathy in it, and will empathize with it rather, and will feel less alone, again, to repeat that. So I'm so happy you came on, and you're always welcome if you wanted to dive more into one of these subjects. And I really appreciate you being on today, man. And sorry for those at home. We had some technical problems before we started to record, but we got those babies figured out.
Yeah.
So, Tach, one more time, what's the name of your podcast?
It is called A Very Brady Podcast.
Can you get it? Is that part of Fourth Hand Media?
That is part of the Fourth Hand Media, and it's available anywhere else. Wherever this show, you're listening to this show, you can listen to that show.
Awesome. Well, Tach, again, thanks so much for being on, and I look forward to being on A Very Brady Podcast and telling you how much I fucking hate the Brady Bunch.
Let's schedule it.
All right, sounds good, buddy. You have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. And everybody out there, thanks so much for listening to Sad Times. As a reminder, get a fuck cigarette, man. Light it up. Have a fuck. And, based on, what we talked about today, hang in there. Stuff passes. And appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Sad Times.
You've been listening to a Fourth Hand Joint.